All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about the top 3 metrics that SaaS CEOs have not been tracking.
We failed.
Now, I've been working with a bunch of SaaS CEOs in my time as a board member and an advisor. Previously, before that, I was the SVP of Marketing for Salesforce, CMO for Zendesk, and CMO CRO for Slack. And I've had a lot of great conversations with these CEOs, and I've kind of seen a gauge for what they're tracking.
Would you walk us through a typical day for you? Yeah.
And a lot of times, intensely focus on pipeline metrics, great metrics there. Today, I'm going to talk about those 3 metrics that I think that they are not tracking, that every SaaS CEO should be.
SaaS CMO Pro.
So the first one, Net Promoter Score. Now, actually, I will say, of the 3 that I'm going to be talking about, NPS, sometimes they will be tracking. Or some variant of it, CSAT, or some type of experience metric. But that being said, not enough do. So let's start off with, what is Net Promoter Score? Net Promoter Score is a really simple, easily asked question. It's a single question, and all it asks is, how likely are you to recommend your company to a friend or colleague, right? So if it was Slack, it would be, how likely are you to recommend Slack to a friend or colleague? And then it gives you a 1 through 10 score. There's a lot of advantages of Net Promoter Score, or NPS. The first is, it's super benchmarkable, right? So it's a single question. The methodology, the wording of the question is always the same, and it's super easy to track against your competitors, against your industry group, just in general, right? The score actually ranges from -100 to 100. And so you can see that there's a wide variation of scores there. Essentially what it means is, if 10 people are sitting around in a room, 10 of your customers, and you ask them, hey, how many of you guys would recommend, your company? The net is how many on net actually raise their hand, right? So if someone raises their hand and someone says, no, I absolutely wouldn't, they kind of cancel out, right? So average B2B SaaS score is something like a 17, which means only 1.7 would raise their hand. This is a really important metric because most SaaS companies, I think just about every company in the world, should be concerned about how they're growing and how fast they're growing. And especially now, how capital efficient they're growing. That's a really big thing, is not just, are you growing fast, but how capital efficient are you growing? And the foundation of any great growth is having people that are talking about you and recommending you. Because what ends up happening is, you love a product and you talk to a friend or colleague, and they're much more likely to, get interested in that product and buy that product.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
I'll give an example. This is not in the SaaS world. This is the Contigo Cup. I love it. I love it. When I used to commute into the city, into San Francisco, you can do one hand. You can hold it one hand. You can open it. It's got a little open there, and it doesn't spill, right? You can go like this. It keeps my drink super warm throughout the morning. I'm a coffee drinker. Decaf. I know it's weird.
Coffee, decaf.
But I love it. You should go get a Contigo cup if you have not already. I am not being paid for this. I just love Contigo. And you'll find that a lot of people will love your product. You're always going to have some fans out there. You're going to have some people that love your product. And there's a whole marketing playbook that I'll do another video on, which around evangelism, on how to tap into those and how to get them to spread the word and amplify that voice. But what ends up happening is, when you get these word of mouth recommendations, they are gold. So anyone that's done marketing or sales knows that when a word of mouth comes in, and for those of you doing lead scoring, word of mouth leads always convert the best, right? And because it makes sense, right? If you had a really trusted colleague or friend tell you, oh my God, this company's amazing, you got to check them out. There's a lot of weight behind that. You didn't just see an ad, you didn't just see a press release, someone that you trust, that they came in. But not enough companies track their word of mouth. Net Promoter Score is a really good metric, a proxy to figure out that evangelism, to figure out how many people are recommending you, right? And so it's something that I absolutely recommend. Here's the thing too, you can track your competitors' Net Promoter Score. I won't dive too much into the devil of details on all the metrics and how you calculate them and how you get them. But basically for Net Promoter Score, what we've done in the past is, you have to identify your target group. So, demographics, psychographics, firmographics, whatever it is. Okay, so for Slack, it was a lot of people. If you're working, it was 18 to 50, I think. And we worked with SurveyMonkey. There's other providers out there, but we would basically send a survey to our target audience. And then we would just ask them. We'd ask the Net Promoter Score, but we'd also ask the Net Promoter Score for our competitors too. And what that does is that allows you to understand not just how you are doing, but how your competitors are doing and how they're tracking over time. And that's really important because a lot of times what happens in marketing and or sales is, you might be growing good or you might be growing bad, but you're not really understanding sometimes the why behind that. And sometimes what ends up happening is you might start off with a beautifully simple product, but over time, I call it the death of SaaS. You just add feature after feature after feature. It starts getting harder to use. It's more complicated. It's showing its age. And you have competitors that come up that are just a beautifully simple product. And all of a sudden, that much higher net promoter score, they're growing much faster. And your growth then has to come on more brute force methods, right? Maybe you have to just rely on purely outbound sales, which is a really, it's fine, but it's an expensive motion. Or maybe you're having to rely a lot more on paid marketing campaigns, which again are okay, but it costs money to run those paid campaigns. But the word of mouth, if you can focus on that, incredibly powerful. So that's my number one metric. Net promoter score, start tracking it, you won't regret it. Number two, a brand metric. I told you a little bit about my background, Salesforce, Zendesk, Slack. But before that, I actually spent 10, 15 years on the consumer side. I did my first startup right out of college. It was kind of on the consumer side. It was for it's actually an early SaaS, gaming. We did competitive ladders and tournaments, but I also worked for a lot of media companies, IGN Entertainment, News Corp. And one thing that's very common in the consumer side is you will track your brand. There's a bunch of metrics you can track there. I like aided brand recall. What that means is, again, you survey someone and, in Slack's case, you would say like, hey, which of the following companies in the team communication space are you aware of? And you list like, at the time, Slack or HipChat or Microsoft Teams. And they might go, oh, I'm aware of these companies, right? There are other ones that are good ones for brand too. You can measure Unaided, which is where you don't even give them the Slack or the Microsoft Teams. You just have to, which for team communication are you familiar with? You can do sentiment. Oh, you're aware of Slack. Okay, well, what's your opinion of it? Very favorable to very unfavorable. What we found, or what I found pretty early, was especially at Slack, was we were tracking some of our competitors, which at the time we considered, traditional email clients, whether it be like an Outlook or a Gmail, that had very, very high awareness, 95 percentile, but they didn't really have the favorability because just a lot of people didn't like email. It wasn't working for them. It was kind of a kludgy tool. It wasn't invented for team communication. Whether it's, aided recall, unaided recall, sentiment, there's a couple of online ones you can use. You can use share of conversation or share of voice. Basically, the idea there is when someone is talking about a topic that's related to your space, how many times is your company mentioned when they mentioned that topic, right? So if someone's talking about team communication, was Slack mentioned? And this could be on, X or any of the online social platforms. And there's different ways to track it. That being said, just track one and get a baseline, right? Because what that does is it allows you to make investments in brand. And I think that's really important. The thing with B2B SaaS is you may be in a space, right? And maybe you're doing really good in that space. But what happens is the very nature is if you're doing very good, the VCs sitting there, maybe watching this video are going, oh, that company did great. I need to fund another one in that space because the space is growing, right? So you're always going to have a lot of competitors. You're going to have like maybe 5, 10 competitors. A lot of times in B2B SaaS, everybody looks the same. Everybody sounds the same. So you want to make these investments in brand. That doesn't have to be expensive brand campaigns. I'll talk about that in a video too. You can invest in things like a unique voice, editorial tone and voice. You can invest in things like a unique visual identity, making your software actually fun and easy to use. That's all part of brand, right? But you want to be able to measure it because if you can't measure it, what inevitably ends up happening, and again, I advise and warn for a lot of different companies where they won't make those investments in brand because they can't track it. So they're like, well, we spent this money, but we never know what happened with it, right? When you start tracking brand and you literally have every month, you have a data point on what your aided awareness was, right? That's the first thing I did when I got Slack, I started tracking it. So we can start to see when we invested in campaigns, exactly how much our brand was lifting up. And bonus, by the way, found a lot of the brand campaigns ended up generating a lot of demand and a lot of pipe. Money, 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 money. This awareness component is really, really important because you want to be able to track, you want to be able to invest in brand. A good way to think about it is brand is long-term demand gen. Demand gen is short-term demand gen. Short-term leads versus long-term leads, right? And usually, if you're CEO, you should be thinking several hills ahead, right? There's this old saying, sales is always thinking one hill ahead. Marketing is thinking like 3 or 4 hills ahead. The CEO should be thinking, 10 or 20 hills ahead. And certainly all the amazing CEOs I worked with over my time, there's Mark Benioff or Stuart at Slack or Mikhail at Zendesk, we're always thinking very far ahead. So those investments can pay off and they do pay off, but having a metric to measure it is really important. It's important for you to believe it. It's important for your board to believe it. It's important for the other stakeholders internally, your CFO to believe it, right? And when you get it down, you literally get it down to like, hey, a point of awareness will cost us this much to get. And that's going to allow you to have a holistic viewpoint. And again, similar to NPS, you can track your competitors, right? When you do those surveys, list your competitors. You can see exactly the investments they're making, or maybe they have much more brand awareness, right? Or you're just trying to understand how you can break into that market, because there's just a totally different set of tactics you use for brand than you will for kind of short-term demand gen. Okay, so brand metrics, start tracking those. Number 2, that was number 2. The last one, number 3, that I rarely see SaaS CMOs tracking is PQLs, or product qualified leads. So this is kind of a shift in evolution. Entire funnels used to be built 30 years ago just on, how many leads came in, and those leads went straight to sales, and you'd have a very sales-centric motion, which was very expensive. And then, SaaS starts coming out, of course, and now this means individual users can literally go to the website and buy it or try it or, sign up for different plans there. It starts to disrupt how people learn about software and buy software. What you start seeing with the evolution of models like freemium, or just letting individual users go and, try out the software or use the software, maybe they're on a lower plan, the way people are researching and buying these products totally changes, right? From a pure top-down model, where you're going in, this company's never heard about you because you haven't invested in brand and you're not tracking brand metrics, separate topic. But they're coming in, it's brute force. And how many CEOs have you gone into these meetings where they have no idea who you are? You have to start from ground zero and explain it, right?
I never cared who you were.
And you are right.
But shouldn't the people know the hero who saved them?
So you have this model of land and expand, right? Where you start to get a small deployment, you start to expand. And this idea that people are spending more time in the product. The idea behind a product qualified lead is historically, it's kind of similar to a marketing qualified lead. So in an MQL, if you're not using that, I can recommend that too. But in an MQL, what you do is you score the leads when they come in. So when marketing gets a lead, it could be a marketing accepted lead. Maybe that's just a form complete. Someone filled out a form, they saw something, but then you actually score it, right? You're like, okay, which company, they come from which industry? Historically, how well have we converted leads in that category? How big are they? How fast are they growing? Literally, there's 100 different signals you can use. It's just like the Google algorithm, right? Like you can use 100 different signals. There are tools out there that literally go to every single one of your leads. They'll go to their website. They'll see like how many people they're hiring, right? Because if a company's growing fast, they're much more likely to have the budget to buy you versus one that has no open heads, right? They're probably super tight right now. So you can score this stuff, which you should be doing on the marketing qualified lead side. But what the product qualified lead does is it says, okay, what about these people that just come in? And as opposed to the normal route, let's just immediately have them talk to sales, which a lot of people don't like, right? And people are changing how they're exploring and using these tools. They're going straight into the product. So now it's like, okay, they've gone to the product. We have 10,000 people that went into the product last month. Should we send all 10,000 to sales? That's not really a good model, right? Like some people will do that. They'll send literally every single people that have a pulse of intent. They'll send to sales. And then of course sales gets pissed off because they're like, oh, this person, they're not even ready. They're not ready to buy from us. And why are you wasting my time? And salespeople are very expensive, and rightfully so. There's really great ones out there, but you don't want to waste their time. They're a very precious resource you have. And so you only want to send people that are ready to go. And the idea is that behind a PQL is that you nurture people in the product, right? So now maybe there's one person that went into the product once, didn't get very far, stopped using it. And there's another person that's going in, 5 times a day, right? And all of a sudden, their little company, now they have, 5 people using it. Now there's 20 people using it, and they're using it intensively. Maybe they're still all on the free plan. That's a really good PQL. Or maybe that's a company that's in the space that's just perfect for you, that you can convert, or that you want to get in that space. It's a vertical that's really important for you. Or maybe it's a 5-person team, but they work at IBM, right? And they have 300,000 employees. And you're like, normally we wouldn't send a salesperson to work on such a small team, but we're like, hey, this is a really big company, has a ton of potential. We saw that all the time at Slack. We'd have small little deployments in these really big companies. And we're like, hey, we want to help nurture that along. So the product qualified looks at that. Again, it can look at 100 different signals. You can do in-house stuff for scoring your PQLs. You can use outsourced tech that will help you score that. It can also layer in some of the earlier stuff I looked at from the marketing qualified leads, right? You can look at, hey, have they been to their website? Are they hiring? All these types of things, right? But you get that score, and that's really helpful for sales to go in and then to start mining those leads out there. It also allows you to think about, like, how are you going to nurture these people? Just like in marketing with an MQL, well, what if someone not at the threshold, right? Well, what can we do to nurture them? We're going to send them more content. We're going to help educate them about the space, top, medium, bottom funnel content. We're going to show them cool customers and how they've been using the product. You can do the same thing for PQLs, right? Marketing can continue to nurture these folks. So you can do it at scale, right? Maybe you do in product education. There's a lot of different tactics you can use to make these PQLs pass the threshold to where now it makes sense to have a salesperson go in there. It also makes sense too from the product folks. Now they're thinking about it. How do we get more people to be more active? So they become PQLs. Right? Maybe your product team doesn't really have a metric, right? Maybe they're just building features, and that's their metric, is how many features they can build, which, by the way, leads to that earlier point I mentioned on why SaaS products are really hard to use, because you just add feature after feature after feature after feature. A lot of product teams don't think about how we can make the product more simple, how we can increase usage within the product, how we can make more PQLs. Maybe we can make it as a metric for that team to share in. Very powerful. Those are 3 metrics that I see most SaaS CEOs are not tracking. I think if you want to grow faster, if you want to grow more capital efficient, these are 3 metrics that I guarantee you are going to help your business. So thanks so much for listening, and looking forward to talking to you next time. Hey guys, one last thing. So if you like this video, if you want to see more of them, head on over to SaaSCMOPro.com today. That's my official website. You're going to find there my full library of videos. You can sign up, get notified, be the first to watch new videos as they drop. Next, I've had a lot of people ask me, hey Bill, what camera do you use? What microphone do you use? So I've got a full list of all the equipment that I use on the website there. I found for me that really helps improve professionalism for a lot of these Zoom and Hangout calls that I have with my clients. It took me like 2,000 hours to research all this stuff, so you can just skip to the end, find out what equipment I used. Hopefully that's helpful. And lastly, if you are a founder or CEO and you're kind of curious, like, hey, what does a board advisor engagement looks like if you wanted to work together? Again, feel free to go to the website there, SaaSCMOPro.com. It's got all the information on how I structure those engagements, as well as how to reach me. So anyways, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and carpe diem.